is to try and give people something that can refer back to if they're watching this back on video, or if they access the document that's on our web, that this document will go on our website. Something they can refer back to when we start to open the conversation up about what culture is, how we can grow the culture in our clubs, in our teams. Hopefully, like I say, this will provide club leaders some guidance over how to go about establishing and keeping a flourishing club culture. The first thing that I think all clubs should be doing, if they haven't already done it, is to take steps towards establishing the club values, the club mission statement, the club vision, and the playing style and philosophy. I think these things need to be up front and center when somebody comes into your organization, whether it be a coach or a board member or a player or a parent, that they know exactly what you're signing up, or what they are signing up for, the type of environment that they're putting their child into, and even themselves if it's an adult player. And what underpins it all are the values that you hold as an organization. Give me 1 second, just trying to let people in as they just turn up. Can everybody still see the presentation? Didn't you guys see the presentation?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, we can see it.
Sounds good. Okay, so when we talk about club values, we're not talking about phrases of what we value. We're talking about, ultimately keywords that underpin what we believe and why we believe it, and things you would consider the non-negotiables. So things that, as an organization, these are values that you are going to stand behind at any point, whenever anybody questions a decision, whenever a decision has to be made, whether it be by a board or a director of coaching or a team coach, that the values that your club, that your organization hold dear are being adhered to. So I've just put a list of some club values down here that are referenced from various club websites, and you can, if you go onto the Wyoming soccer website, I think the next give me a second. So yeah, I'm coming up to that. But these need to be written down and observable, put on your website, or on your clubhouse, on your indoor facility if you're lucky enough to have one. So people know exactly what you stand for, and then from your values, then you can start to develop the mission statement and the vision for the club. So as we move into the mission statement, what we're trying to portray in a paragraph or two is what are we trying to achieve, or what is the process going to look like. And if you go onto websites, that most of them have something along the lines of, established in whenever the XYZ soccer club strives to be the best destination for youth soccer players across Wyoming, with focus on long-term player development of the player and of the person, to create lifelong participation in soccer and an upstanding citizen that contributes positively to society. I think it's important to have a mission statement that not only addresses the environment that you hope to put the players in, but also, ultimately we're developing people. If we're doing our jobs right, or we're doing them somewhat well, we're not just developing soccer players, we're hopefully developing a half decent person at the same time. I'm sure you've all had experiences with players that, even though you weren't conscious of the fact that you had a culture, or you tried to cultivate a culture on your team, that there's been maybe a kid or two that just didn't quite fit the culture, or wasn't the right fit for the team. So in a sense, you already know what culture is. You already have felt what culture is. as it pertains to soccer. I think for us as a state and the clubs within our state to start to push the level that our kids are playing at in our local clubs, we need to start getting some of these basic things in place so we can build from them, start to build bigger, stronger, better programs that are better environments for our players. Then the club vision is ultimately what you want it to look like in an indeterminate period of time. So, XYZ soccer club will be the standard for all soccer clubs across the state and the country by creating a culture that provides a foundation for all to reach their fullest potential on and off the field while having the ultimate holistic soccer experience. So when the kid or when the adult graduates out your club, leaves, moves away, that they can look back on their time and they can see that you were working towards that goal. And that to be able to achieve this, it all feels a bit like pie in the sky when you start to sit down as a board or as a technical director or as a technical staff or as executive staff to try and put these things in place. It all feels a bit like pie in the sky until you get to the point where you start to plan how you're going to get there. So I'm going to refer back to WSA here. So we on our website, the very first page, if you click the home page and about is the first tab that drops down. Vision, mission, core values, and then on the new website, which this is taken from, you can literally click straight into the 5-year strategic plan from this place. And that feeds into what we'll be talking about later in the action plan is going to be a big part of this presentation because I want to give people who are listening to this or watching this back something that they can do, like a process. So there's actually, something that they can reflect back on and get an action plan and then go into their organization and put it in place, some practical application ideas throughout this presentation. But I think as we move forward as a state and as more kids are playing the game across the country and as the game grows in the United States and in Wyoming, it's more and more important for clubs now to establish a club style of play. I think a lot of parents and a lot of players now have a good idea about what decent soccer is supposed to look like, right? I think the days where, kids, thinking about dribbling the ball in from the halfway line on a penalty kick like the old MLS used to do at the back end of the 80s and the early 90s, that is gone. Nobody's under that impression that that's what soccer looks like anymore. Everybody is aware of the Barcelonas and the Real Madrids and the Manchester Cities of the world. So I do think that an important part of establishing a culture within your club is to go about establishing your playing philosophy. Now, if you don't have somebody on your board or you don't have somebody involved in the club that is a soccer specialist, for lack of a better term, has gone through numerous coaching badges and those sorts of things, there are services out there that you can go and source this stuff from. You can use the state association as a reference point. You can use myself as a reference point to start putting these things in place. But as we'll talk about later, they have to be achievable. We can't just say, okay, we want to play like Barcelona, because that might provide a visual context for players when they first sign in and say, oh, great, they want to play like Barcelona. But when you get down into the process of how to play like Barcelona, it becomes evident that there's nobody in the club that knows how to do that. So we need to balance our style of play and where we're at as a club and how far we're going to push ourselves and what we're going to demand of our coaches and our volunteers. But I do think that outlining your style of play as an organization, as a club from the very beginning, should become part of your core value process as you start to develop these things for your club. So if you already have a mission statement, core values, and a vision in place in your club, I would strongly suggest getting it up on your webpage, getting it out in a newsletter, making people aware of it. But I would also encourage attaching your style of play or style of philosophy into that process, so people know what to expect when they come to your organization. And then I just listed some of the stuff that we reference on the WSA website as it pertains to the 307 program. So these are not particularly in-depth statements. You could probably break each of these 5 bullet points down into another 10 bullet points, but you just want to give them an idea, a taste of what to expect when they're playing or when they step on the field. Again, referencing back to the WSA website, we have everything on there. If you go into the 307 program or the ODP program page, you'll see our philosophy and our playing style are listed there, as well as some videos I did a couple of years ago that goes into a little bit more depth about that. And then once you have these things in place, okay, so we know what we stand for, we know what our values are, we know the type of person and the type of player that we want to produce out of our club, out of our organization, and we know what the end goal is. We want to be the best club in the state, we want to be the best club in the region, whatever that looks like. At that point, you need to go back and do an analysis on what you already have. So what we would do, what I have traditionally done, and there's many different ways of going about and reflecting on what your organization is good and is not good at. The preference for me is a SWOT analysis, so your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and reflecting and giving an honest reflection, putting a committee together, potentially of board members or staff, if you have paid staff or coaches, sampling somebody or a group of people from each, parents, players, board members, volunteers, coaches. You want to try and get as wide range of people on that committee as possible, and do a SWOT analysis of the environment as it currently is. You want to go, and I've plugged one that I did in recently more as a personal reflection and on my coaching rather than a club one, but a lot of the stuff that I talk about, because of my role at a club level and at state level, has applications to the club. So I thought I would share it with you guys. So organized what I think my strengths were, and I didn't go overboard. I'm just doing 2 or 3 in each. So coaching, training sessions, managing the performance environment, leadership, those sorts of things as strengths. And then in the weaknesses, I'm still in coaching training sessions, but for me, in my coaching, recreating the problem or breakdown that occurred in the previous game can sometimes be difficult for me, especially if I don't have something like video to reference back to. So I know that's something I've got to work on. But more broadly, when we talk about club stuff, when we talk about opportunities, I talk about recently purchased video equipment here. From a club standpoint, that could easily be an opportunity for the club. And then the threats to the organization itself. So traditionally for clubs, they tend to be things like recruiting volunteers, keeping volunteers, paying staff. I know that a lot of clubs would like to be in the position to pay somebody to take over these tasks, and aren't necessarily always able to do so. Lack of indoor facilities is obviously a threat to a lot of people in a lot of clubs in our state, a lack of access to indoor facilities. So I would strongly suggest again that once you've gone about establishing what you want it to look like and an idea of what the process would look like, you've got to go back and have a look at what you're doing now. Because what you're doing now, I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff going on, but I'm sure there are areas in your club, even the biggest clubs, and I know Brian's on the line, and I'm sure he's honest enough to say that Cheyenne Soccer Club is not perfect, even though they're in terms of membership and in terms of what they do, or the biggest in our, I think the biggest in our state, certainly one of, if not the biggest. So they've had, they've obviously had success, but there needs to be a constant reflective process to try and improve. And through doing a SWOT analysis, in my opinion, that gives you a very clear, objective way of going about that. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Hopefully Brian's not too disappointed that I just dig them out for Cheyenne not being perfect. And then once you've established where your strengths, where your weaknesses are, what the opportunities are for growth, and what your threats are, then you can go about laying out the goals for the club. Now, depending on what your goals are, what the immediate goals are, what the long-term goals are, that is for you to decide, as you as an individual, you as a club, you as a team coach. But then we get, make them specific, make them measurable, make them attainable, make them realistic, and give them a timeline. So we can, it's again, it's not just pie in the sky. There needs to be accountability to this process. We need to be able to go back and reflect on, are we meeting our goals? And the only way to be able to do that is to give a timeline and then work back from there. So be specific. If your goal is to build an indoor facility within the next 5 years, you are specific about what it is. Being measurable will depend on your ability to fundraise. So you'll need to mention something about that. Attainability and realistically, do you have city involvement? Do you have county involvement? Or are the things in place for this to actually happen, for a building to go up? Are those in place? So is it realistic? And then by giving it a timeline, you can then mark yourself against how successful you're being. Are you meeting the goals that you've set yourself as an organization? And just set various goals and have committees that work on them concurrently. So you have them working, somebody's working on, developing your indoor facility, somebody's working on hiring a director of coaching, somebody's working on fundraising, however you operate as a board, but have some accountability, whether you all work on one project together and then move on to the next, that's your prerogative. But there needs to be a more systematic approach from our soccer leaders within the state to drive the standards of the clubs across the state. Most clubs do a fantastic job. But we want to make sure that we're driving the level in every single possible corner of the state. And with the geography the way it is, it's difficult for any one person or any staff to do that, for that matter. So we need to start taking some internal accountability as clubs and organizations. Once you have the goals, then you can start to put in place the action plan that we referenced before at the beginning of the presentation. And this is a very basic flow chart that I choose to follow, one that works for me. That's why I've put it in here. So a reflection about where we are now, got that from the SWOT analysis. What we're good at, what we need to work on, what are the opportunities and what are the threats? Where do we want to be as an organization? So considering all the factors, getting together with your board, getting together with your staff, your coaches, your parents, your players, and then starting to split your task into short, medium, and long term, and how to determine when and who was going to achieve those. And then it's just a repeat the process. So as you might know right now, WSA is going through their strategic plan, 5-year strategic plan that will take us through to 2025. As a technical staff, we quarterly revisit this as it pertains to us. So there are 2 pillars that are under the technical jurisdiction, and those are players and coaching education. So when we get together quarterly, we talk about what initiatives can we put together to encourage coach education, hence where the coach development initiative came from. The pot of money that was appropriated came from conversations between staff and board members after reviewing this plan. When we talk about player development, if any of you have been involved or have been exposed to the 307 or ODP program, we're making a big push to make changes there. To increase the level of development that we can provide as a state association in our state programming, increase the opportunities to put players in more difficult situations like ODP championships. And we review this quarterly. Now that is a very big, very thorough document that was put together by a number of individuals. And I think I saw Jeff pop in on this conversation before, and I know he was heavily involved in this process and continues to be involved in 307 and ODP as well. So he has good insight to this, but this is a live working document that gets reviewed annually by the board, gets reviewed quarterly by staff, and clubs should beginning to start to think about putting documents like this in place so we can start to drive the standards of soccer. And I don't just mean on the field, but I mean in terms of the culture that we have here in Wyoming. It's still very heavily volunteer based, and that is fantastic. We would not across the globe, we would not be able to play this game without volunteers. But in terms of the game being professionalized from a coaching standpoint and from a club standpoint, our region, Montana, Dakotas, Nebraska, ourselves, Idaho to a certain extent, are a little bit behind the curve when it comes to professionalization of standards. And I'm not a proponent of saying, okay, every club in Wyoming has to go and start paying somebody to come in and run their club. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to get across is that we are already playing a game of catch up on the field with some of the rest of the parts of the country. And it's down to the environments that our players are in and our clubs that those standards need to be more consistent, I would say. And there needs to be more accountability, and clubs need to be held to a higher standard. So players can be held to a higher standard. So we can drive and push our players to develop. And I don't just mean we're talking about the best 2 or 3 kids in your club here. I'm saying we push the standards and we drive the standards to make the very best environment we can make for our U5s. Whatever that looks like in your club, in your area, that it can be better. And organization like this from the top, from the board members, from the directors of coaching, from club presidents, from state presidents, state staff, that will trickle down and improve every single environment that we provide our players. And that's ultimately what we do everything for, to keep the player at the heart of every decision that we make. So as we move through this process now, if you're a club president, you're on a club board, you're on a state board, you're a club director of coaching, you have some sort of leadership role in your environment, you need to start considering the people that you're working with, the people that are around you, the people that you are hiring, the volunteers that you bring in. Do they fit your culture? How do you know they fit your culture? Is it a friend of a friend? Typically it's a parent of a player that's in the club or has been in the club a couple of years. Mom, dad knows the lay of the land, so they get involved at board level. That is absolutely fantastic. That's exactly what we need. That is how our clubs run, is through volunteer boards. It's how our state organization runs, through a volunteer board. But we can still be selective about the people that we choose. And I break these down into 3 things. So you want to identify what the qualities you're looking for in club leadership based on your vision and values. So what are the things that you hold an underwriter or something like that can provide some value to your board through their qualifications and through their experience. But ultimately, if that person doesn't share the vision and values that you have as a person and that you share with the club, it's not going to be a good fit. So the very first thing you need to look at is the person. Is this person going to be a good fit? Do they share the common values that we have as a club, as a board, as an organization? Will they be a good fit? Once you establish that, once you know that, then we can start to look at skills, and then we can start to look at the responsibilities that person can have, whether it be board level, whether it be a coach, whether it be a volunteer. Obviously here in Laramie, we have Turf Wars, which takes a huge and monumental volunteer effort. So there are a number of responsibilities there, but everybody that volunteers is there for the right reasons. They want the event to be a success. So we break it down like this. So I've just given you some examples. So leadership competencies, like we talked about the vision there. What common values does that person have? Are they focused? Are they emotionally intelligent? Are they influential? Are they knowledgeable? That leads to the skills, the skill of strategic thinking. Are they good communicators? Maybe that person can be your new web designer or your new social media person. Adaptable and problem solving. I'm sure anybody here that's ever served on a board has been asked to sit on various committees and has had to adapt to different situations, whether it be, from disciplinary committees to a league committee position. And then you have to decide on, your role in those committees might change. And that's a skill in itself. And then the responsibilities that you give those people, are they just going to be board members, members at large, committee members, chairs? Are they going to be in charge of finances? Do you have an accountant, associated to the club? All those sorts of things. But think about it as a pyramid up. situation where the person is most important. That's what's going to lay the base for you to be able to work with that person and improve and continue to improve the culture that you have in your organization. Does anybody have any questions? I'm sort of rattling through these slides here. Nope. Okay, moving on. Brian, who's referenced before, who's on the call, who's the director of coaching in Cheyenne, him and I went and sat in a presentation this past January in Baltimore. And it was about leadership. It was about hiring and firing staff. I think that might even have been the topic and the name of the actual presentation. And the lady, the moderator who was there, stood up at the front, and her sort of final message to the group was, hire the person, not the resume. Ultimately, because you can't. It's very hard to change a person, but you can educate an employee. So when you're thinking about, hiring or recruiting board members, volunteer coaches, paid directors of coaching, technical directors, executive directors, all of these things that go into the organization of a youth soccer club, whether you have 50 kids or whether you have 500 kids, whether you have 5,000 kids, everybody that is involved serves a role. You're going to have to interact. They're going to have a direct impact on your organization. They're going to have a direct impact on your culture. You need to make sure you're getting the right person before you're getting the right resume. And that sort of resonated with me and has stayed with me since we went through that process in January. And something that I will continue to keep in the back of my mind when it comes to hiring and firing people. But, whether in a technical director position for the state association, director of coaching position for a club, whatever it may be, I think it just, when you stand back and think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not saying that you always have to hire the agreeable person, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you don't want to hire people or recruit, I'm sort of talking about hiring here because that was the quote that I used, but I'm not saying you don't want to always recruit agreeable people. They don't just have to be people that are going to come in and say yes to every idea that you or the board or the president has. You want people that will actively challenge ideas, but you want them to be people that are challenging the ideas because deep at the heart of their challenging behavior or the questions that they're asking is they are trying to make the culture better. They're trying to make a positive impact on players, on the organization. And I think that's really important. When it comes to coach education, parent education and curriculum, I do think that these have a big role to play in the culture of a club. I've referenced before, I think in the first or second webinar that we did, in my experience, the thing that I have felt has had the biggest impact on the culture in our club is coach education. Being in front of the coaches every 2 or 3 weeks, doing coach education, building, even if it's just, we end up in a discussion about a system of play or a formation or something like that, which is completely off topic when it comes to sorry, I think somebody's just sent a message in the chat. So when we talk about education, as I said, coach education has had the biggest impact on the culture that I have seen, certainly in an immediate impact to affect a group of players, right? So I see the culture that I wanted to implement starting to grow, to fester with the teams and the players themselves, which is a fantastic thing to see when you're one trying to drive that culture. But I have a supportive board that have allowed me to go in a particular direction, or you do certain things, And Laramie is lucky enough to be able to afford a full-time member of staff to dedicate their time to creating a culture. If it is a volunteer organization, that can be more difficult to do because you ultimately relying on a volunteer to go out and get educated to the point where they can start educating one another as a coaching body. So I do think that part of this process, when we've established our values, our vision, our mission statement, and our playing style is obviously underpinned by a curriculum. So you're going to have to put some sort of investment into session design. Now, whether that's just buying a bucket of sessions from one of the many places you can buy curriculums from these days, and just disseminating that to coaches and saying, hey, go interpret this the way, that however you need, whether that's bringing in a specialist to design one for you and your club, whether that's paying somebody part or full-time to come and do that job on a day-to-day basis, that is up to the organization. But I do think that a curriculum to follow for coaches, whether it be rec, competitive or competitive, underpins the style of play, which I do think is a selling point, can be a unique selling point for clubs, can be a draw for potential players and parents to come to you to play. You need some sort of learning process, some sort of curriculum in place that comes from coach education. Obviously, we as a state association can do that for you and come in and teach the grassroots licenses and teach the Ds. And, we've been up to Jackson and done some. We've certainly done some in Casper through 307, done some coach education here in Laramie and in Cheyenne. So it is happening. But I think clubs can, if they buy into that coach education process more, we will start to see a shift in the culture of our state more quickly than we currently do. Not that there isn't a good culture and a strong culture here, but we're always trying to drive the standards. So increased coach education, and if you can do that at club level, that will go a long way to creating a club culture that you want. And I would also say regular parent education. Parent education at the very least once a season. I think as an intro to the fall season and intro to the spring season, you should be doing parent education at least once there. I've seen that done in a number of ways. I've seen that clubs will host parent nights, bring everybody, everybody will come to the town hall or something on that particular night, or the community centre. There'll be a big presentation. This is the values, vision, mission statement of the club. This is how we expect our players to play. This is what we expect of our players. This is what we expect of our parents, etc., etc. I've seen them done on a team by team basis, so the team coach is responsible for that meeting. I don't think there is a right or a wrong way to do it, but I do think it's absolutely necessary to get in front of the parents, because ultimately they're the ones that are bringing the kids to practices, paying the fees. You need the parents' involvement. Traditionally, I certainly came from a culture in New York where it was like, everybody on the inside of soccer were the sane ones, and all the people on the outside, i.e. the parents, were the crazy ones. But there needs to be more. There needs to be more of a relationship there. There can't be the attitude that we have to our parents and our clubs. Yes, sometimes they can be challenging with some of the things that they want or need from us, but that doesn't mean that we can't serve them better in some capacity. So we do need to make sure that parent education is at the top of our agenda as a club or as an organization. And then encouraging continuous professional development. If you're a volunteer organization, is there some way to work your budget where you can put a small pot of money together for coaches to access to do coach education? Obviously, we have the coach development initiative at the state level. You can do the online and now the in-person grassroots licenses and up to the C license with some level of reimbursement from the state association. So not only is it online education, but it's in person now. But that pot of money will not live forever. So we do need clubs to step up and start to think about these things. How can we support the education of our coaches? And that could be hosting a course. That could be hosting a grassroots course or a D or a C. It can look like a number of things, but we do need our clubs pushing the idea of coach education. And then the final point is do you want to consider bringing in a staff person, bringing in somebody who is qualified? Is that even a possibility? If it's not a possibility and it's not something you're looking at doing, what are the other creative ways that you can do coach education and parent education, and who is going to take responsibility for that? Do you have somebody, if you don't have a director of coaching, or you don't have somebody, a paid staff to coach some of your teams, or the old trainer model, whatever you want to call it, or do you have somebody at board level or at an executive level in your club that represents the coaches, that represents what happens on the field? Because I know that a lot of our clubs in our state don't have directors of coaching, but I also know most of our clubs in our state do not have a coach representative actively on the board, which I think, in my opinion, is a mistake. I do think that we need to have more coach representation at board level, to give across the opinions of the guys and the girls that are essentially on the field delivering the content to the players. So something to consider moving forward. And then you want to, what we have started to do here at club level in Laramie, and what I've been involved in previous clubs that I've worked in, is at the start of the year when the kids sign on and pay their fees, they get, as part of the the welcome package, they'll get the club handbook and rules and regulations, expectations of players. Part of that package is the social calendar, where every event that the club is going to be involved in outside of soccer. So July 4th events in your towns and in your local communities, farmers markets, parades, Jubilee days, Frontier days, all those sorts of things that take place in your local communities, food drives. Can the clubs become more involved in these activities? Can you get out into your community more and serve your community more? Pack bags at the supermarkets or whatever that looks like is going to be a little bit more difficult for the foreseeable future. But there are ways to serve the community and promote your culture to the wider audience. You can do that through fundraising, so raffles, not just for your membership, but to the wider community, sponsorship opportunities, including local businesses within the soccer club, to source external revenue to drive standards, because sometimes it needs a larger pot of money to host coach education courses, and maybe it's not in the budget right now. So you have to find creative ways to create a budget to drive the standards of the coaches, of the parent education, of the curriculum design, whatever that looks like for your club. An annual awards dinner is something that I know Cheyenne started last year or 2 years ago. We have our first one, or we're supposed to have our first one coming up this summer here in Laramie. I know that there are similar events that take place in Jackson because I'm on their mailing list. And club nights, if you're close enough or lucky enough to be able to go MLS games, can you take teams to MLS games? Barbecues, holiday celebrations. We do a practice indoors at the pitch in Laramie around Christmas where the kids get dressed up as, in Christmas outfits, that type of stuff. Just social events where the members of your community, the members of your club can get more involved. The more involved they are, the easier that it is to sell and grow a culture, a positive culture. And then a big one that's obviously has taken off over the last 3 or 4 weeks is the esports space now. Players connecting online, playing FIFA against each other. There's a big announcement coming from WSA here in the next couple of weeks about a new partnership with a professional esports community company to try and take this process a little bit more seriously. So it's not just Lisa and I and Laura sitting in an office trying to work out brackets and who's going to be playing who and how they play each other. So there is a growing space there for players to stay connected, for clubs to stay connected through esports. I know part of the process of this new esports rollout is there'll be club v club competitions. So Gillette could be playing Casper, or a number of their kids from Gillette would be playing a number of kids from Casper, and there would be some sort of club v club cup aspect to it, like a state cup for esports. So all these things are coming down the pipeline that you are resources for you that you can use to grow the positive culture that you want in your club. Other things to consider: club practice uniforms, if you don't already have them. Having all the kids turn up in the same uniform to practices is that immediate visual of seeing 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 kids on the same fields wearing the same thing. Immediately gives a sense of culture. Whether it's just a perception or whether it actually creates culture would be down to your decision, how much you push it. Does every kid have to be in the uniform, or they can't practice, those sorts of things? Or do we just provide them with a uniform and they turn up when they turn up in it? However you build that into your program, there's the visual, having everybody in the same uniform definitely creates the sense of culture. We build it into our annual fees here. We build it into the annual fees in the 307 program. So they don't have a choice, right? They get the uniform as part of the package. And it's always branded with the club or the program, whatever it is. Game uniforms. And this seems like an obvious point, but I know that it still happens in some places that, the under 15 boys team is playing in a completely different uniform to the under 10 girls team, in terms of the uniforms that they use on game day. We should be encouraging our players to all be playing in the same uniforms, branded in the same way, looking the same way, and encouraged to attend everybody else's games when possible. That will go a long way to growing the culture with the players. With club support, scheduled club support in your tournament weekend schedules that when you're going to these tournaments. Coaching attire, providing coaches with uniforms, or at least with a t-shirt or a jacket or something, so they have something to identify with the culture. Just more buy-in. If I know anything about coaches, it's that they love free gear. Okay, you can get anybody you want to do, any coach you want to do pretty much anything you need done if you give them some free gear for it. So I would actively encourage that as buy-in from the culture. You do need buy-in from the coaches. Ultimately, they're the ones that are going to be stand in front of the players, which is where you want your culture to affect the most. And then club apparel. Do the parents and grandparents and brothers and sisters, do they have the opportunity to be able to buy stuff that has the club logo on it, even though they might not actively be playing in your club? Just again, another way to expand and grow your culture, so people have pride in being part of your organization, which should be a big part of your values that underpin the culture in your organization. I know that various websites that people get their uniforms delivered from now, whether it's soccer.com or whether it's Challenger Sports or whoever it is, whether you have a direct relationship with a manufacturer, can you put something in place for people to be able to access apparel that's branded in the way that your club is, just to reinforce that positive culture. Last thing I think I want to touch on, I don't think there's anything after this, is the communication piece, especially at the moment. Clubs need to be making a continuous effort to get in front of their players on social media, through email, through newsletters. The more you can get in front of your players and your parents at this time, the more, but you can continue to grow the amount of buy-in that you have in your organization. So when we are able to get back on the fields, we see good numbers, we see bigger numbers, because we've made a real effort when we haven't been on the fields to engage with membership. So things like newsletters, website updates, writing a blog, having a director of coaching, or having a player write a blog, have some sort of player perspective is always something that I've found works well. A video channel to be able to post potential training activities or demonstration of games. If you're lucky enough to have video recording equipment, you can put games on there. Make sure you have people sign a waiver when they sign on the dotted line when they register for your club. But there are lots of ways you can use a YouTube channel, and it can be a private YouTube channel. It's only available to your membership. Again, another way that parents will stay engaged in the process, engaged in the culture. Social media, obviously, we know most people have a smartphone at this point. I don't profess to be being any good on it. So the club, when they brought in a particular board member, that was one of the remits of the board position, was that they would handle some of the aspects of the social media output of the club. Again, identifying strengths and weaknesses of your recruitment when it comes to board members. Have you got a way to be able to demonstrate success stories, college recruitments, ODP, camp players, whatever that might be? Is there an avenue for alumni to come back, whether it's an adult league in the summer and you have the opportunity to bring your alumni back into some of the club social events, the July 4th events, those sorts of things. And then survey your membership. Once you've done a spring season, you thought it went well, but you have no idea if your membership did unless they're actively voicing their opinion. So survey your membership after every season would be another big recommendation from me. And it can be as simple as, yes or no answers, and it can be 2 or 3 questions. It doesn't have to be huge. You can target whatever information you feel you need to get better as an organization, but I would strongly suggest surveying your membership. If you've been part of our ODP program and our 307 program over the last couple of years, you'll know that we have sent out numerous surveys because we're making changes all the time. We want to make sure we're making changes that people want, that are going to work for our membership. So I would strongly advise making sure that you consult with your membership on how to be better. And that can be from a team perspective as well. As a head coach, send a survey out at the end of the season. Did your kids enjoy it? What did they enjoy? Because if you know what they enjoyed, then you can do more of that. You can fit more of your teaching into that process. So I would definitely say that that's a big part of growing the culture in your club. That is it in terms of content from the presentation. I'm about 10 minutes short of full time, so I will open it up for questions if we have any. If you do have questions, I'm going to see if I can make sure that everybody is able to unmute themselves. Give me 1 second. Okay. So you should be able to unmute yourselves at this point if you have any questions. Okay, not hearing anything. Again, as I've said every week, if you have anything, that you don't necessarily want to ask in the public forum, you have any questions, you have any resources that maybe I've referenced in previous presentations. I know I got an email today from somebody who was in the last couple, who wanted some of the stuff I think we talked back in the first presentation. So, we'll get that stuff to everybody if it's not readily available on the website. If there's anything that I talk about in the presentations, reach out to me. I will send it to you. I'll share as much information as I possibly can, or as much as you possibly want. Apart from that, really appreciate everybody dialing in. It's going to be a push from everybody across the state to be able to grow the game, grow the culture of soccer across our state. It starts with you, the people who are on this call. There's 7 or 8 of us on this call. You go and affect another 7 or 8 people, who go and affect another 7 or 8 people, who go and affect another 7 or 8 people, and before you know it, we positively affect the culture in our state and within our clubs as quickly as we possibly can, and just build on the good things that we're already doing here in Wyoming, and look forward to working with everybody closely as we continue to move forward. As always, hope everybody is safe, happy, and healthy. If you need me for anything, don't hesitate to reach out. My cell phone number, my email address, everything is available on the website. Look forward to catching up with everybody soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dave.